speak to me. So Kanye West, is like a foreign land for me. And then
Same for me.
I don't relate to his music. I don't relate to his rhetoric. I don't relate to almost anything about him. I don't relate to his choices in life. I don't relate to his experiences in life. I don't relate to his clothing. I don't relate to why people have put him on a pedestal. I don't relate to why people pay him attention. This is all a foreign land to me. This is all really challenging because it does not come naturally to me to like extend my empathy to someone with whom I feel virtually nothing in common. He's not someone that I would choose to spend 5 minutes with, and so I really have to work to try to like understand the world as he understands it. And so I think what's going on with Kanye is a whole combination of things. One, I mean, self-destruction and social destruction has been apparently written into his whole career. Like he's said and done crazy things throughout his career. Number two, he's just gone through a divorce, and divorce can like drive people crazy. Number three, men frequently react to divorce by sabotaging their income and their wealth to try to reduce the payout to the other party. Four, he's now a born again Christian, and he's a Christian baby, as he says it. So he's having this whole new intense religious experience. And then I think perhaps the most powerful thing that may be operating here is that according to Kanye, he is an alcoholic. And Kanye said that when he wrote the tweet, tomorrow I'm going DEFCON 3 on the Jews, he was both drinking and smoking. And I assume when he said smoking, he wasn't meaning cigarettes. So this is also someone who's said that he has all sorts of personality disorders. So he certainly seems like a walking, talking version of various personality disorders, such as narcissistic personality disorder. So you've got a whole bunch of things going on here. And then there's another element. When people get red pilled, they often get discombobulated. Like when they realize that they've been lied to about certain things, they then think that they've been lied to about everything, including the moon landing, and that the world rotates around the sun, that the world is not flat. And so I think he's also being discombobulated by a red pilling, by his newfound Christianity, by his divorce, by the amount of money that he's needing to pay to Kim Kardashian. And I think he's being discombobulated by personality disorders. And most influential of all, it sounds like to me from an outside perspective, perhaps by his self-confessed alcoholism. He was under the influence of alcohol and apparently drugs when he made the initial tweet that started this self-destructive spiral.
He hasn't backed down on it, though. One would think that after the high of alcohol and drugs wear off, the person would say, "Whoa, what the hell did I do? This is crazy," and then back down. But he's actually ratcheted things up to the point of identifying as a Nazi and praising Hitler, even stating his love for Hitler. It doesn't get much more explicit than that. So it would seem that this, for him, is not just something done in some sort of stupor. Perhaps it was initially, but it's something that is quite intentional at this point.
Yeah, but it's intentional in, I mean, alcoholics and sex addicts and people under the force of compulsion do all sorts of crazy things. Like if you're in a bad state to begin with, then things will tend to spiral. I mean, I know in my life experience, I spiral, I either spiral up or I spiral down. So I think spiraling is a very common human experience. And if you've staked out a claim in one area, it's very normal to try to defend it. And then the more you defend it, the more you get attacked. And so the more you kind of hunker down. Now, I don't think that Kanye West is all about genocide. All right, I just finished listening to the complete Alex Jones interview, and when he says "I love Hitler," he means that in the Christian sense that he loves everyone. Right? He talks about he loves Stalin, he loves Chairman Mao, he loves the Zionists, he loves Ari Emanuel, he loves his bitterest enemies. So nowhere does Kanye endorse genocide or any of the horrible things that Hitler did. So when a Christian talks about they love everyone, and I also love Hitler and Stalin and Mao, that doesn't necessarily mean that they are endorsing the genocide carried out by Hitler, Stalin, and Mao. So I don't think he's a genocidal maniac. I don't think he intends harm to anyone. I think he's just in the grip of new ideas in connection with these other things that are troubling him. So words are only 10% of communication, and even if you just look at the words that Kanye is saying, there's nothing in there that he's endorsing starting a world war, that he's endorsing concentration camps, that he's endorsing repressing people, making legal legislation against people on the basis of their ethnicity or their religion. There's none of the horrible things that we all associate with Hitler is Kanye endorsing. So he's making a rhetorical point that he's willing to go there, say something that's the craziest thing you could possibly say. Like, I love Hitler, but he's saying it in a Christian context that he loves everyone. So you just hear, I love Hitler, sounds absolutely mad, particularly in an Anglo country. The United States still has substantial Anglo heritage, and so does Australia and England. Yeah, it sounds absolutely mad because these countries fought against Hitler and Nazis in World War II, but that's not the context in which he's speaking. He's speaking as a newfound Christian who feels like he's stumbling onto a better way of living, which involves loving everyone, and that includes the most heinous people around, including the people who you will receive the most social opprobrium to love. Nowhere do I sense any meanness in what Kanye is saying.
Of course, he also denied the Holocaust, and in a tweet from his official 2024 Twitter account, he identified as a Nazi. I think perhaps he was a. I think there are probably different things going on. I think that he has this sort of, in his mind, Christian perspective that you were talking about, which has unconditional love for all people. I also think that at a certain point, he's just spiraling, and he could go from this sort of Christian love to something more malicious, even though he has not endorsed, inflicting genocide on people, as you mentioned. I think that he's very unstable, and he could basically be, and this is sort of in accordance with these mental illnesses which he's admitted to having. He could basically have one personality from one moment to the next, and that would certainly make him very inconsistent, incoherent, and quite possibly dangerous.
Yeah, and so I'm unbothered that he is receiving so much opprobrium. Like, he brought it on himself. I don't share the perspective of the mainstream media that here the most prominent thing you need to know about Kanye is that he loves Hitler. I don't share that. I don't believe that the most prominent, the most important things you need to know about Nick Fuentes is that he's a white nationalist or an anti-Semite or a Holocaust denier. These are, I think, are incidental to their own unique expression of Christianity and their own unique pushing back against conventional wisdom and public speech codes. When you listen to Kanye and Nick Fuentes, they're not about doing harm to Jews, generally speaking. Now they say wacky things about the Holocaust, which frequently presages, deeply disturbed people who are bent on harm. And it's entirely possible that Kanye and Nick could trigger individuals to do bad things, provide a temporary sense of unity for people who don't like Jews or who are antisocial. They feel like they found commonality with a celebrity, they found a new community. So there is some downside, but that's not the primary thing that leads to groups killing groups. The primary thing that leads groups killing groups is profound conflicts of interest. So I think it's entirely possible that even more people will be dissuaded against anti-Semitism and
Mhm.
against Holocaust denial and against white nationalism by the what appears to be or what is presented as this Kanye West, Nick Fuentes, Milo Yiannopoulos clown show.
Mhm. It definitely is a clown show. Now, there are some people who actually like what Kanye West is doing because they think that it will quote unquote mainstream anti Semitism. I agree with you that it's very unlikely this will happen. As a matter of fact, it's certainly harming the cause of anti Semitism. Obviously, I don't think that's a bad thing that this that this concept is being having crazy sauce poured all over it. However, I do think that so the people who think that in some way, shape, or form, what Ye, as he calls himself, or what Fuentes are doing, the people who think that this is somehow a positive endeavor or productive endeavor, these people must be tremendously disturbed. And I would imagine they would be unstable enough to do something quite terrible if given the opportunity.
Right. So when you're dealing with antisocial, disturbed people, you don't want to be encouraging things that set them off. On the other hand, we don't need to give up free, other values. It's not like there's only one value in life, and that is to minimize the chance that the crazy, dysfunctional, antisocial people go off in a harmful way. There are also other values such as free discussion, freedom of speech, just opening the whole panoply of ideas and discussing them rationally so that certain disturbed individuals could misuse something. That doesn't mean that we say keep the speed limit at 10 miles an hour. So if we kept the speed limit at 10 miles an hour, 20,000 Americans a year would not die in auto accidents, but it would considerably crimp our way of life. And if we restrict speech to the equivalent of
Mhm.
driving a maximum of 10 miles an hour, that would have such a negative effect on our
I
quality
agree.
of life that it would not be worth it. And I don't believe, I've not seen evidence that there's a high correlation between quote unquote hate speech, which has no objective meaning, and hateful behavior. So we have millions of examples in history where people say hateful things without there being any mass murder or genocide. So, on the other hand, it makes sense that sometimes hateful rhetoric does lead to hateful behavior. I just don't think, I'm just not convinced that the correlation is particularly high because there's no objective definition of hate speech that would not include the Bible. And I certainly would not want to see the Bible banned or restricted. So, when people say, bad language leads to bad behavior, I think, yeah, probably in some instances it does. But from my understanding of reality, that's a really low correlation. And the amount of correlation matters. It's not like it's one to one. Someone who says something bad is then going to do something bad. It seems to me it's more like a ratio of zero point 0.1. The correlation is quite low. It's even 0.01. It's nothing like a really strong correlation.
Mhm. And no, I agree entirely that just because some people can say terrible things, speech should not be curtailed. That's that's an argument that I would argue against vociferously, and I certainly don't think that someone like Ye or Kanye, whatever, should go to jail as he might in a European country or in Canada for saying what he said. I don't believe that at all. So that's definitely not a road I would like to go down. I think what's interesting is that he seemingly was, speaking of speech, was trying to get banned on Twitter because he was really pushing Musk's buttons personally, let alone about matters to do with Jewry. And it was almost like he was trying to get banned. I don't know why he wanted to get banned from Twitter, but from what I could tell, he was being personally insulting to Musk and saying ever edgier things after Musk gave him an opportunity, after he reinstated his account in the first place, and then gave him opportunity after opportunity to chill out. Any idea on what this might amount to with regard to Ye's behavior, worldview, so on and so forth?
But he doesn't respect normal social cues, which is why I would be concerned about being in the same room with him. It just
Mhm.
doesn't seem like an appetizing thing to me. So he's always when he's being interviewed, he's always wanting to set limits. He responds, very badly to people like Tim Pool, who's a fairly inoffensive guy.
Mhm.
He is constantly wanting to impose his will on other people, what we can and cannot say. The bizarre costume that he went on Alex Jones with. So he's not somebody who responds to normal social cues. He seems driven to push people, to their limit. And as someone who's done that myself, to always be testing people, I know what a destructive spiral that is. And so he seems to need to test people to, feel at ease that they really do like and respect him. And so he tests people, way beyond their limits. And so people respond by not liking you and by putting limits on you. I don't know how anyone would interact with Yi without, fairly quickly putting self-protective limits on him, because otherwise it seems like he'd just, run you over, take over the conversation. And so there's this weird hypermania, like grandiosity, narcissism with him that anyone who has to interact with him is immediately going to put limits on him. There's like an insane overestimation of his own abilities and his own
Mhm.
potential and his own capability. And so this drives people, and I know I've experienced this myself. This that drives people to put limits on you, and then the narcissist and the grandiose personality, like myself and like Kanye, we react very badly to limits, and we just double down, which usually leads to a self-destructive spiral and an antisocial direction, which seems to be what is happening with Kanye.
Now, what about his 2024 presidential bid, which was announced, but it's not officially a thing yet in terms of a legal organization? Uh, he can't accept donations, basically. That's what I'm saying. What do you think this is? Do you think he's seriously trying to run for president, or do you think this is just some vehicle for him to get attention purely from the start? That's what it was intended to be, or maybe something else? Am I on the wrong track?
I think it's just grandiosity. I mean, isn't that the most American thing? Like, isn't there, a story that every American kid thinks he can grow up to become president one day? That if you're a great person, then would you run for president? So, will Tom Brady run for president? Well, back in the day, would David Petraeus run for president? Dwight Eisenhower was a great general, so well, he ran for president. So we're influenced by the society that we're in, and there's kind of an ethos in America that if you are great or seem to be great, then people start talking about you running for president, and then the grandiose personality will seize on that and go, oh yeah, why not me? Why not me? So I don't think it's serious. He's not someone who strikes me as capable of running a serious political campaign, but it does seem like a typical discussion that someone with a grandiose sense of themselves would indulge in.
Now, there is the theory, and I believe you began to touch on this earlier, that Kanye slash Ye slash West decided to do this whole meltdown because he wants to minimize his net worth, so he does not have to pay Kim Kardashian over $2 million a year, $200,000 a month in child support payments. And she's much wealthier than he is, so that on its own has to sting. She also very publicly carries on with other men, so that has to sting worse. So obviously, Kanye West's financial situation is quite terrible with this judgment. But the fact that he's paying someone who has more money than him and who's going to be publicly carrying on with other men as he gives her money, that just has to make it worse emotionally. So, do you think that he has the intelligence or wherewithal to plan out something like this all along, just to make it a sort of basically pseudo asset protection scheme, this meltdown, knowing that it would cause him to lose all this money? Or do you think that that point of view, given someone like Kanye, is probably not accurate? Any take on it?
I think it's probably a factor in the background. I don't think it's the driving factor. Another factor in the background is that earlier this year he was planning to cut ties with middlemen such as Adidas and other
Mhm.
companies that he was working with, because I think it's very common among many successful people that they think they can cut out the middleman and become even more successful. So Kanye wanted his own bank. He wanted to run his own, clothing operation. He wants to run for president. And so I think it's very typical for many celebrities and successful people to want to cut out the middleman. And so I think this was perhaps an even larger factor than wanting to reduce his net worth so he doesn't have to pay out to Kim Kardashian. So I think a lot of these factors kind of coalesce. So the grandiosity that you don't need the middleman, grandiosity that why not me? Why can't I be president? The taking the red pill and thinking that now I've got insight into basic truths that the conventional discussion does not allow. The sense that you're special and that you don't have to play by the normal rules of the game. I think all these factors are coalescing into this spiral. Now, when you watch Alex Jones, his appearance on Alex Jones, it is compelling, and I wanted to just be able to dismiss it as just a complete clown show, because I don't relate to Kanye West in any normal way. But when I watched it, it did have a compelling quality. He's not just a madman. There are other things going on there, and he's not just an idiot. So if you rationally examine some things he's saying, such as okay, blacks are having their own Holocaust due to the high rates of abortion, you can understand his you can understand that point of view. It's not a crazy point of view. When when he points out maybe that all his managers or agents were Jewish, that might be right. That there are a disproportionate number of Jews in Hollywood or in the agenting game or in management or in middleman positions. That's not a crazy thing to point out. And I he made more sense in the Alex Jones interview than I expected. I thought just stark raving mad, total clown show. It wasn't that. It also had a compelling nature to it that wasn't just purely train wreck. Right, there was a large degree of train wreck in what Kanye is doing, but if you're like me, if you really push and extend your empathy, you can kind of get a sense that he is like trying to touch on some powerful and important and thought provoking issues. He just does it in a way that's not congenial to how I like to talk about things.
Yeah, there's actually something I really want to get into with regard to him. But before I do that, touching on something we discussed before, Christianity, he did describe himself, as you said, as a baby Christian. But if one looks at how he's acting, such as how he acts in various situations, this bizarre play for dominance, being very impolite, saying things that are gratuitously offensive, none of this really gels with Christianity, even though the New Testament contradicts itself. There are some general themes in there, and I think it's fair to say that Kanye is not acting in a very Christ-like manner. I'm not a Christian myself, neither are you, but I think even we could see as much. Do you think that the hypocrisy of this situation is something which weighs on him at all, or do you think maybe he doesn't take the religion seriously enough to have a weigh on him, or is it something else? Anything to say about this?
Yeah, I'm not sure how seriously he takes his Christianity. I'm not sure how seriously Nick Fuentes takes his
Mhm.
Christianity because I don't see where it is biting into their natural appetites. Like if they're really taking Christ seriously, then you would see that it would have an inhibitory effect on indulging the basic drives. And Kanye makes it very clear that while he's all for Christ and God, he doesn't want it to restrict his access to supermodels. And so if he gets to a point where he is, feeling restricted to a monogamous way of life, and perhaps if he is indeed an alcoholic, then he should not be drinking and probably should not be smoking and doing drugs. If we see that it's having a serious inhibitory effect on his basic appetites, then I think we can take his claims of Christianity more seriously. But right now it seems like Christianity is more something that he's using rather than
Mhm.
something that is working through him. So, like with Nick Fuentes, one sees no evidence of Christianity inhibiting
Mhm.
anything that he wants to do. It seems very much like another tool that Nick Fuentes is using for his own self advancement and as a political and social approach to reshaping society in a way that he finds congenial. So I expect that everybody's going to try to reshape society in ways that they find congenial. But Nick and Kanye don't seem to be paying any price for their, Christ is King declarations. And it's only when you see people actually paying a price that you think, oh yeah, they're not just talking the talk; they're also walking the walk. So right now, it looks like Christianity is just another thing that Kanye is using to advance himself.
Mhm. I agree with that entirely. Now, talking about who Ye slash Kanye slash West is, he made a very, probably the most important statement he's made since this nonsense began to Tim Pool. He said that he is not someone who is personally developed for his age. He said that his personal development stopped in his early 20s because at that point he became famous and he started outsourcing all of his personal responsibilities to other people. So as a result, Kanye slash Ye slash West today is very immature, and this is something that he admits. And I also think he's probably of naturally low intelligence. I don't think he is. I don't think he is. Mentally defective or anything like that. I think he has probably has an IQ in the 80s, which is intelligent enough to do certain things, but the guy is never going to be a biochemist. However, I think that if you combine his low intelligence and his severely retarded personal development, which is not talking about IQ in that regard, it's talking about how what his maturity rate is. I think that he is someone who is uniquely predisposed to doing crazy things and to do stuff without expecting any sort of consequences for his actions. And I think he's been indulged by no shortage of people from many different walks of life over the years, over the decades. And now, perhaps him having to account for what he's doing is causing him to just lose touch with reality and live more in a fantasy. And that certainly opens him up to people like Milo Yiannopoulos, Ali Akbar. Now he calls himself Ali Alexander. And then there is the presence of Nick Fuentes too. So it's an interesting and a very sad state of affairs. Anything to say about what I brought up?
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. Number one, I think what unites people like Alex Jones, Ali Akbar, Nick Fuentes, Milo Yiannopoulos, and Kanye West is their overwhelming grandiosity and their willingness to go to where the attention lies. I think this unites them much more powerfully than any particular ideology. This unites them more than anti-Semitism or white nationalism or American nationalism or the MAGA movement. That these are people strongly bent on self-advancement, going to where the attention goes. Number two, Neil Strauss, a Rolling Stone journalist, made the point that pretty much every rock star he met and got to know had the ability to, one, captivate a large audience, and number two, be absolutely helpless at the normal tasks of daily life. And I think that goes for Kanye West, but I think that would probably be true for a lot of other people in his
Definitely.
genre. I think this is just pretty common to celebrities. And so, at least with Kanye, you do get at times some self awareness and some humility that is kind of winning. That is, he has a kind of a weird charisma about it.
It's a very bizarre, interesting situation. Now, what about this whole thing with Fuentes and such? Now, Fuentes is interesting because, as we both know, he was until what basically a few days ago this Euro-American traditionalist focused on Euro-American history, heritage, and culture, and he actually has done things which could fairly be described as white nationalist or white supremacist. He certainly has dipped his toes into that pool. However, now he is in a servile position to a black man who acts in a very to say stereotypical sounds a bit nasty, but he acts in a way that is not becoming with regard to Afro American stereotypes. So Fuentes basically has done a 180, it seems, on the racial issue, and I don't think he's even bringing up race much nowadays for obvious reasons. What do you think's going on with Fuentes here? Because this is a rather shocking pivot from my perspective with regard to him.
I don't think Fuentes is shocking, and I don't think he is pivoting. He's never primarily made it his thing to denigrate black people. He's never really been a white nationalist. Mickey Kaus made this point in his weekly Parrot Room discussions with Robert Wright that Nick Fuentes, to the extent he's an anti-Semite, he's unlike all our previous understandings of anti-Semites. He is not primarily about trying to hurt the Jews. If he is a white nationalist, he's unlike pretty much any other white nationalist we've seen before. So I don't think anti-Semite, Holocaust denier, white nationalists really primarily apply to Nick. Nick is fairly conservative guy with some, open race realist attitudes and some Jewish skepticism that was, a large part of traditional Christianity. So Nick doesn't really speak that differently than hundreds of thousands of Christians prior to World War II. So Nick is simply refusing to obey the new speech codes that have essentially applied to Christians since World War II, since the Holocaust, that they need to become more Jew sensitive. My father was born in 1929, and he had the same kind of Jew skeptical attitudes of Nick Fuentes. I don't think like Holocaust denial is a primary part of Nick's campaign. He made one joke about it. Now Kanye keeps denying the Holocaust, but he's not presenting any evidence. He's obviously not a scholar. He's not someone who's thinking things through. So I think with Nick, this is I would be my bent would be to look for a through line. So I think people make sense at least in their own head. So hating blacks was never a large part of Nick Fuentes. He is someone with kind of a make America great mission. Whether it's with Trump or without Trump, he's someone with pre World War II Christian attitudes on life. Very common attitudes, and so he is seeing a new opportunity. But Nick strikes me as a pretty stable guy. So he doesn't strike me as unstable like Kanye West. He doesn't strike me as unstable like Milo Yiannopoulos. He doesn't strike me as criminally inclined like Ali Akbar. Nick, under tremendous pressure and having tremendous success over the past 4 years, has maintained himself in a fairly consistent fashion. He may emphasize one thing more or less depending on context, but what strikes me about Nick is that he is consistent, that he's able to maintain a high level of stability, and he's he's tremendously gifted. He is charismatic. He does do things that not one person in 10,000 could do. He's able to hold down a show on his own for 2 hours a night and get thousands upon thousands of live viewers. This is unique. So he is gifted. He's smart. He's glib. He's articulate. He does seem to believe in things, and I think he's willing to try something new. And if it doesn't work out, he'll just go back to his show. So while Milo and Ali Akbar and Kanye, I think, are highly emotionally unstable, Nick strikes me as a fairly stable guy, and I do see a consistency with what he's doing. I do see a through line with what he's doing, and I think if it doesn't work out, he'll just pivot to something else. Now, there's recently video of him throwing a soda on somebody at a restaurant, but the context of that is they first threw ketchup on him. So if someone throws ketchup on you, it is not irrational or necessarily unhealthy for you to respond by throwing a soda back at them. So Nick has not displayed the sort of self-destruction of Richard Spencer or many other dissident right figures. So he has surprisingly held himself together during the past 5 years, and so I don't anticipate him flaming out. Like, he may completely split from Kanye and Milo, and apparently Milo has left now the Kanye campaign over Nick Fuentes, and Kanye is siding with Nick. But when this boat ride's over for Nick, I think he's going to be okay, and he'll just move on to the next thing.
I think Fuentes is. I don't think he's unstable as Kanye is, or Milo, or Ali Alexander. Nowadays, he's called Alexander. I would say that Fuentes is unstable in his own way in terms of saying things that are incendiary and serve no productive role, seemingly just because he enjoys saying them. It's mild stuff like saying that I believe he said the dinosaurs existed a few thousand years ago, which is a perspective rejected by Roman Catholicism, which he purportedly is in adoration of. Then he's made statements about women being inherently evil. He's talked about burning uh, females alive as witches. He's also fantasized about raping men on his show. He also was caught, despite his hardcore anti-gay posturing, with transvestite pornography, and that was only because he mistakenly revealed it during a live stream. So, I mean, he's done a lot of things. I mean, this isn't even beginning to scratch the surface. I don't know how stable he is. I think he is someone who can hold it down, hold it together more than Kanye slash Ye slash West or the others I mentioned. But I do think that Fuentes in and of himself is a guy with some serious issues, put mildly. And it seems to me that his greatest hatred is not for Jews. Even though he's harping on anti-Semitism now tremendously, even more than he used to in the past, but I think it's probably for women. And it's rather interesting because he has talked about how men being a pseudo romantic with each other, a term that I believe he described as being quote unquote sussy, is or pseudo sexual, if you want to be more blunt. He said it's based. So it seems to me that he is definitely someone with a dislike for women of a certain kind, but at the same time, he has a public image of somebody who dislikes gays. And I would say that this inherent contradiction in Fuentes probably inspires him to do a lot of this stuff. And if this contradiction were not there, he'd probably be a much more productive person.
Right. So it's kind of a lot of weird behavior. And I was just listening to his appearance on Alex Jones with Kanye, and he talked about how Israel had murdered John F. Kennedy and Robert F. Kennedy. I mean, that's just nuts. There's no evidence for that. So Nick does say a lot of things that are just nuts, and he's probably if you just place him in the genre, he's an entertainer with a political component, and so just like you shouldn't be shocked if a stand-up comic says something that's factually inaccurate. Nick is really doing a form of stand-up on his shows, on his public appearances, with a more substantial political component compared to most stand-ups. Now, he apparently doesn't care for women. He wouldn't be the first person who's deeply closeted homosexual who perhaps takes on the role of incel, even though he's not involuntarily celibate, because I'm sure there are a lot of women and men who'd like to get with him. But I think he's just like left these doors closed, the sexual expression. So if it's true, he's still a virgin. He's just chosen to close those doors, as many great men in history have. They've decided, okay, there are certain doors in my life that I'm going to keep closed so that I can get certain things done. Now, I'm sure this has a warping effect on him, but it also may have some beneficial effects in that it focuses his energy on his career and on his production. So, yeah, everything comes with a cost. And so, if he was out sleeping around, or if he was married, if he had kids, all right, those things would all come with a cost, and they would all restrict his live streaming. Uh, at the same time, he's warped by the lack of intimacy in his life. He apparently doesn't have friends. He just either has followers or allies, and he's not in romantic relationships. So I'm sure that warps him, gives him a distorted view of life. On the other hand, kind of like a monk, it kind of frees him up to dedicate himself to his holy calling of live streaming. So of course that's going to come through in a warped and dysfunctional way, but he's not immolating like, say, Richard Spencer did.
And this is a question about, well, actually, it's a question I had intended for Ye slash Kanye slash West, but since we're talking about Fuentes, I'll ask it about him, then West. Do you think that Fuentes really believes most of what he says, or do you think it's all sort of like an act for him just lashing out on pure emotion? What do you think?
I think it's a combo. So he is an entertainer, and I once watched a YouTube video on how to excel at doing YouTube live streams, whether you're a gamer or someone just talking, and it makes the point you should just start throwing off everything in your head, except that which will get you in trouble. And so to be good at what we're doing now, it is really helpful to be incredibly candid and share a lot of crazy things that go on in your head. And so that's part of what makes Nick so successful, is that he just shares a lot of crazy things in his head that normal people would never share. I do think, though, that there is like a fundamental through line in his politics. So yeah, I believe that he believes half of what he says, and then the other half of what he says just thinks he's throwing off.
What about Kanye slash Ye slash West? Do you think, because I don't think he'd be as calculated as Fuentes is in terms of anything that he says or how he goes about his public life, his extremely public life. Do you think that he really believes what he's saying about this stuff, or you think he's just sort of spouting off? There was the argument that's all a lie calculated to get his net worth down to zero so he doesn't have to pay Kardashian, who once again is wealthier and carrying on with other men. And those two things I think would just make a lot of men want to reduce their wealth out of spite so they don't have to pay this person. That much is understandable. But I would also say that I don't think that Ye slash West slash Kanye is intelligent enough to pull something like that off.
Right. So this reminds me of a story I reported in the porn industry where there's this male actor who is apparently transmitting HIV to a couple of dozen porn stars. And so was he doing this intentionally because he altered his test to be able to keep performing? And the guy was doing so many drugs that I'm not sure how much of his right faculties he was in. And so the way that Kanye speaks and acts seems to me, from an outside perspective, pretty common to other people working in his genre. And so I don't generally see a whole lot of calculation and thought and rationality and philosophical depth and profundity in his genre. So he seems like pretty much any
Mhm.
other rapper. It's just that he's rapping about now his newfound love of Jesus and his newfound love of being red pilled, and it just seems it just it's so uncomfortable to try to take these people seriously. Now, I
Uh-huh.
guess we have to because like he's got 35 million following, but I don't see how he's less coherent or less rational than other members of his genre.
Yeah, now here's an interesting thing. I was saying that when spoke about my perspective of Kanye slash Way Ye slash West not being intelligent. Some people said, or somebody said, I think it was only one person. This guy made $1 billion. He became this music icon. Blah blah blah. And I responded something to the effect of, well, it doesn't take any genius to become a successful rapper. Rap is a very primitive form of music, and one need not be very intellectual in order to rise to the top of the totem pole of something like that. Then I also discussed the fact that this guy had been managed by people who are much more intelligent than he is in order to build his, now collapsed business empire. And left to his own devices, he'd never be able to carry that on as we see today. So I don't think he is a man of any great intelligence or wisdom or insight. I think that's very ironic that he carries on against the Jews, considering that it was certain Jews, not the Jewish community on the whole, but certain Jews who made his career so spectacularly successful. I mean, they were the ones who were negotiating these deals for him. They were the ones who were trying to keep on the straight and narrow financially. They were the ones who were trying to manage his behavior from, to prevent the sort of meltdown that's going on now, basically. And yet he turns on these people. He basically bit the hand which fed him, and now he's just lashing out. This is sort of very infantile, childlike behavior, and it does actually make a lot of sense in the context of him still being developmentally speaking a young man, even though he's in his mid 40s now. So it's really something. I actually think that if you were to look at this rationally, you would see that the Jews, whom he dislikes, really without them, he wouldn't have been much of anything. And of course, the only Jews who had an influence over his career in a major way are the ones who are directly involved with it. But all the same, I think that perhaps a lot of his anti-Semitism is rooted in him being rather ungrateful and egotistical and just perhaps plain nasty personality wise. I even heard him blaming the you know who's for Kim Kardashian having sex with Pete Davidson. It's really, really strange. He said that the you know who's misled her as a quote unquote good Christian woman, end quote, to do this thing. And meanwhile, she's not even married to him anymore. Really bizarre stuff.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, he is bizarre from my perspective, and I think from most people's perspective. On the other hand, I do think he's considerably more intelligent than you give him credit for. I would say an IQ in the 120s. So I give him credit for the things that he's built. He has built approximately a billion-dollar empire. Yeah, he had a lot of help with that, but I don't know anyone else with an IQ in the 80s who developed a billion-dollar empire even with a lot of help. I mean, normally people with like I'm thinking of the boxer Muhammad Ali. He was illiterate. Supposedly had an IQ in the 70s. He didn't build, this huge empire. Like, he went through money fairly easily. So I do give Kanye credit for what he's built, even though it's all a foreign foreign world to me. And the nasty part of Kanye is also the charming part in that he's very spontaneous. He just says what's on his head, and so that comes with lots of downsides, but it comes with lots of upsides. So apparently this is a man of, it seems to me, of considerable intelligence, considerable talent, considerable ability, all in areas that are a foreign language to me. And he's a difficult person, but many people who've accomplished great things, like Steve Jobs, also have been very difficult people. So I don't think we can primarily critique him on the basis of rationality. Obviously, Kanye West would fail, but perhaps we need to critique him primarily in terms of performance. And so, just like Richard Spencer, when he was a teenager, he thought he'd become a theater director one day, and that theatrical quality, I think, has pervaded everything that Richard Spencer has done publicly. I think that Kanye has the performer mentality, where he wants to compel your attention, where he wants to tell you stories that are new and exciting, that he wants to be cutting edge, that he always wants to be breaking through barriers. And this mentality can lead you to some dark areas, but it can also lead you to heights. Now, there are heights that are a completely foreign country to me. I can't speak Kanye. His success doesn't speak to me, but I do respect that he has accomplished things, even though they're completely foreign to me. And I think all great artists, and it kills me to talk about Kanye as a great artist, but it's possible, apparently, that he is a great artist. All great artists come with these dramatic downsides. Like if they weren't out there exploring things and saying things that they're not supposed to, they wouldn't accomplish the greatness. And enough people testify to Kanye's greatness that I have to be open to. Possibly he is a great artist, just in an art that I don't understand.
I where do you think this is going to go with Kanye slash Ye slash West? I mean, if he continues on his present trajectory, he's going to be, I mean, totally broke like Skid Row with a crack pipe. Whether or not he'll continue on this trajectory, though, to me is the big question. Say in 3 years' time, where do you expect him to be?
Maybe Louis Farrakhan is a good analogy. So normally you can't thrive in public life and be consistently critical of Jews. So normally you just get crushed. But Farrakhan has survived, and he's been fairly consistently critical of Jews. So maybe Kanye will develop a niche following, so a much smaller following. He'll pay a huge financial price for what he's done, but he will find he's attracting a new audience, and it may be very exciting for him. So yeah, I'd say like a Louis Farrakhan, I think, would be a good analogy. He'll remain in public life, he'll remain essentially a persona non grata, but he'll be there kind of on the margins. Or David Duke, right? David Duke still shows up in the news. He's a punchline for a lot of jokes, but he still gets some news media attention. People still talk about him. So maybe a Farrakhan trajectory.
It could be. I don't think that I'm not a Farrakhan fan at all, needless to say, but I don't think that Kanye slash Ye slash West has Farrakhan's discipline. So I don't think he'd be able to make it as a Farrakhan type figure. I think that this continues to literally just be some guy out on the street on Alameda in LA, who's a transient and losing it, because I mean he's literally going to go through everything financially at this rate, between his obligations to Kardashian, his obligations to the IRS, the fact that he no longer has this money coming in from these merchandising agreements, the royalties from his music obviously don't all go to him. There's a cut that goes to others who managed him and to his record label. So I think that there is a real danger of him just completely bottoming out financially and going into serious debt, because obviously the child support judgment that's not going anywhere, especially in a state like California. So it's really sad that he's like this, but I don't think he'll ever be anywhere. I don't think he'll ever be as wealthy as he once was again. And I don't know that he'll ever be able to pull himself to a point where he could just be self-sustaining financially.
Yeah, I'm open to a more positive trajectory for Kanye than you are, but he's made many surprising moves in his life. So he may, find a surprising way to get out of this, and he may get some, surprising guidance that he actually listens to. So I don't, America loves redemption, and so I I I, I see positive things in his future. On the other hand, what happens to so many rappers? They get shot. They self destruct in so many ways. They get AIDS. They die frequently horrible deaths. Now, I think he's considerably more intelligent than most rappers. That I see a brighter future possibility for him. On the other hand, if he got institutionalized, if he did the ultimate in self-destruction, it wouldn't surprise me. But so 50% of me says, yeah, Cotto's right. Just a continuing downward trajectory for Kanye West. 50% of me sees a more hopeful trajectory for Kanye. So I'm not at all certain that he's headed for the bottom, and I'm also not at all certain that he's headed for in a positive direction. So I think his life and his trajectory is still very much up in the air. I don't think he is doomed in any one direction. I don't think fate is taking over this story, and it's just we'll look back on it in 10 years and go, oh yeah, of course he was just heading there. I still think it's up for grabs. I still think he can pull himself together. I think he can say things that are less inflammatory, more helpful to people, that are more pro-social, that he might listen to wiser heads, and he might even turn this thing around.
We shall see. For certain, we shall see. Now, what do you think about getting to Milo and to the Ali Akbar, Ali Alexander, now called fella? With these guys, it says something very bad about Kanye that he allowed them, as well as Fuentes, to have such influence over him, given the track record of all three. But Milo, when one looks at him, he's openly admitted to having material that he uses against people, that he saved without their knowledge for the intent of using it against them. So the fact that Kanye slash Ye slash West allowed himself to be surrounded by this element is something else. Anything to say about, and now, of course, Milo's no longer affiliated with him, but Milo just came out and said, in true Milo form, that Kanye West propositioned him for gay sex while they were working together. So the fact that Kanye slash Ye slash West allowed himself to be surrounded by these people, I think, says something very nasty about him. But anything to say, Luke, about these people who he has brought into his orbit?
Yeah. So when the African National Congress was fighting its side in the battle against South Africa's apartheid regime, they welcomed support wherever they could get it, and I understand, primarily, or at least substantially, came from communists.
It
And
did.
I don't think that necessarily indicates a lot more than that they were willing to take help from any corner. And so I think Kanye is willing to take help from any corner. I think that the Candace Owens relationship, so that's an ongoing relationship that he's had with Candace Owens for years. I think that's perhaps red pilled him. And so he is showing an openness and an eagerness and an interest in these various dissident right figures, which he may well burn out on in the next 3 weeks or 3 months. But right now, I think Candace Owens red pilled him, and he's going along that trajectory. And everyone's got a path in life, and as people walk along their path, they often realize, hey, I've taken a bad turn. Let me either retrace my steps or let me go in a completely different direction. So this is the path he's on right now, this kind of dissident right path, and like thousands of other people who've fallen in love with the distant right, he may well take a more pro-social turn. He may go in a new direction at any time. I don't think he is particularly wedded to Milo, Nick, Ali Alexander, Alex Jones. It's just that right now these feel like his friends, and so as a celebrity, he probably isn't sure, like, who are my real friends. Right now, this is the flavor of the month. In 3 months, he may be into different flavors.
Uh, that's a very apt way of putting it. Now, who do you think Kanye slash Ye slash West is really talking to at this point with his ramblings? Obviously, it's not the entirety of the audience which embraced him as an artist. It's a much smaller group. Who do you think is really interested in what he's saying? Some people say it's very like downscale whites. Other people say it's down it's young black men. Other folks would say it's basically antisocial incel folks online. Some people say it's a combination of three. Some people say something else. Who do you think his core constituency is at this stage?
Yeah, that's a fascinating question because Kanye and other people in his genre seem to me to, when they're criticizing Jews, to be primarily coming out of a place of being anti-white. And I think for
Exactly.
many black people in particular, they see Jews as the quintessence of whiteness,
Exactly
and so
correct.
all the ambivalent and often negative feelings they have towards white people, they then impute those to Jews and multiply them by three, four, five times. So I think he's probably appealing to uh, that element of the black and people of color community that is anti-white, and also that element of the black and color community that is anti-Jewish. I think he's also appealing to low IQ white people who just have a knee-jerk belief in conspiracy theories, hatred of the global elites, hatred of Jews. So I can't imagine that the audience that he's appealing to is a formidable one. It seems to be, a bunch of marginalized losers. And anytime
Mhm.
you build a movement composed of marginalized losers, yeah, they can do a lot of destruction, but they can't really construct anything. So I
Exactly.
don't see any indication that anything that Kanye, Milo, and Nick are doing right now is going to build anything. All I can see is that it's going to destroy things because they're speaking in a way that just primarily appeals to marginalized losers. I was just listening to Nick Fuentes on Alex Jones with Kanye West, and he said all sorts of inflammatory, completely false things about the Talmud and Judaism, how it's
Mhm.
a-okay with pedophilia, like just awful, hateful, stupid, wrong, factually incorrect,
Mhm.
dumb things, just tossing it off that Nick might have seen in a tweet somewhere, and just assumes that it's accurate because it's useful for him. So there's like such a level of carelessness with facts with Nick Fuentes that it almost doesn't matter whether or not he means it. It's such reckless disregard for what is true if he feels like it serves whatever ends he's seeking, that I don't feel bad for the pushback that Nick Fuentes gets. So even though I don't believe that one could primarily define him as white nationalist, Holocaust denier, or anti-Semite, I'm. It doesn't bother me that he gets slammed with this and other things because there's just so many reckless things that he says that he brings on the opprobrium that he receives.
Absolutely. Now, the thing with Fuentes is that he does promote himself. He even called him genius. And he literally called himself a genius. Uh, so he thinks very highly of his intellect. He's obviously not stupid because he at least able to have the veneer of high intelligence. I don't think he actually has high intelligence, but he has the veneer of it, which means he can't be of low intelligence because in order to be someone who can put on this veneer, you have to have at least something going for you intellectually, or else you will be able to pull off the facade. But when it comes to Fuentes's statements, he really should know better because, like I said, he's not a moron. But it's like he doesn't care, and if he doesn't care about the truth of what he's saying, it begs the question why people should listen to him at all.
Right. He's been captured by his audience in large part. He knows the red meat that he dishes out, and he knows how that helps to make him successful. What enables you to have success as a pundit is that you give your audience what they want. So if Tucker Carlson started
Correct.
doing segments on how the Democrats are right on this or that issue, it would destroy his ratings. If Tucker Carlson started doing segments on social media companies had good rational and moral and pro-social reasons for banning Alex Jones, or for making some other decisions, then he would alienate himself from his audience. If Tucker Carlson was to say, sometimes the elites are right and the popular perception is wrong, he would completely alienate himself from his audience. So I think Nick Fuentes has been captured by his audience, like every successful pundit. Tucker Carlson, I think, has been captured by his audience. And it's not necessarily a conscious decision. People go where the love is. People go where the money is. People go where the attention is, and the views, and the clicks, and the likes, and the retweets. So both Nick and Tucker, I think, turn out a lot of material, consciously or unconsciously, just to give people what they want. So I don't think either Nick or Tucker are primarily forming people or moving people or shifting people in a certain direction. They are reflecting a certain, what strikes me as like low IQ dissident impulses.
Now, this begs a very good question. I mean, we could talk about that's a whole show talking about Carlson, and we're already inching toward the end of this discussion. I'm very sorry to say, but there's still some stuff left to chat about, such as what I'm about to bring up. What kind of audience do you think Fuentes attracts at this point? Because I don't think his audience is necessarily the one that's enamored of Kanye slash Ye slash West, even though there's obviously tremendous overlap. But I think Fuentes' audience is surprisingly non-white, because people talk about like a white nationalist, white supremacist. What I've seen, he attracts quite a few non-whites, but his audience is surely mostly white. And I would say it's probably not even millennials, but Zoomers who are not very socially adept, who probably not attractive to the opposite sex, probably quite a few of them closeted gays, and Zoomers who are relatively, in a comprehensive sense, low status individuals. Now, I could be wrong there, but that seems to be the sociology of Nick Fuentes' Groyper brigade. What sort of person do you think follows Nick Fuentes? Seriously, not like looking at him as pointing and laughing in this day and age.
Yeah, everyone that I've gotten to know, and they've all been online, I don't think I know anyone in real life who has high regard for Nick
Mhm,
Fuentes. I mean, I have high
mhm,
regard for his charisma and his live streaming skills. I don't have high regard for the things he says, but everyone that I've
mhm.
become acquainted with online who has high regard for Nick Fuentes usually turned out to be an alcoholic, conspiracy theorist, a marginalized loser. And
Mhm.
or just young naive people looking for meaning, purpose, excitement. Uh, so so they're not usually graduates of Harvard. They're not usually doctors, lawyers, dentists, accountants. They're not successful CEOs. They're people who are either marginalized losers or people in their teens and early 20s, kind of looking for a way of making sense out of life, and who want excitement, right, and want to be part of something that's world transforming and that's a little bit edgy or moderately edgy. And it's a way to feel something, I think, for a lot of people, that it speaks to them. So I'd say like the average IQ of Nick Fuentes' audience is about 100. I think the average IQ of Tucker Carlson shows probably 105. I think the average IQ of our audience is something like 120, 125.
Uh-huh.
So there's a much smaller potential audience that we're speaking to,
Absolutely.
because anyone with an IQ below 115 is just not going to understand what we're talking about. So Nick
Mhm.
and Tucker are both very good at speaking to that prole audience.
Mhm. They are. I think that Fuentes is more outwardly, even though he's not a prole himself, he's more outwardly oriented toward proletarianism. However, he also delivered a bizarre monologue, which he talked about how much he hates working class people and those who work for a living, whom he derisively calls wages. So this is interesting. It seems like he has this audience of proles, but at the same time, he's giving the backhand to proles in a way that is really, just by any standard of social decency, disgusting. And yet they like him, a lot of them. Not anywhere near most of them, but he definitely gets an audience of them. It's bizarre.
Well, it's not unusual that a celebrity hates his audience. I mean,
It's true.
it's not unusual that people hate the source of their income. So this is very common. I don't think that Nick would willingly spend his spare time hanging out with proles and marginalized losers. That there is an element of his stream which would be much higher IQ and more successful, and I think Nick would feel much more comfortable. But we can't really communicate with people who are more than two IQ deviations, standard deviations either below us or above us. So I think Nick's probably someone around 125 IQ, and that he has the ability to speak to people down to 95 IQ, and he also has the ability to speak with people maybe up to 145 IQ. But he would much rather hang out with people with IQs in the 120s, 130s, 140s than with the great mass of his audience, which are probably around 100 IQ.
Mhm. I don't know that a lot of people stay in his audience. I think he has a lot of cycling in and out, and certainly as he's become more marginalized, it's harder for people to cycle in because he's harder to get to. He has his own platform now where he streams, but it's not obviously not boosted by mainstream social media websites or anything like that. So that's the situation there. I find this whole thing though with Kanye slash Ye slash West to be very fascinating and very sad, and I really think he's on a bad trajectory, and it's a shame because even though I don't think much of his intelligence or his skills as a quote unquote artist, I don't like seeing somebody doing this to him or herself. It's just crazy, and it's highly destructive on the whole because it can also inspire others to self-immolate, and these are always tragic things, but a lot of people today just don't seem to care. I really do think that what's happening with him is a sign of the times, and it's definitely a sign of very troubled times.
Yeah. So I think I'll go back to point number one of my perspective, and that just came to me a few minutes before we did this show when I was listening to Kanye talk on Alex Jones. That one, he regards himself as an alcoholic, and yet two, he was drinking and smoking when he made "I'm Going DEFCON 3" on the juice. So this is someone in the grip of a compulsion that apparently is stronger than he is, and I think if he got sober, I think we'd see very different behavior from Kanye West. And so
Mhm.
this is true for a lot of people. If you get into a spot of gratitude, it can just completely transform how you see the world. So you can think about your boss and think about everything that's wrong with your boss, or you can think about the things that are good with your boss. You can think about family and the kind of loving things they've done for you, and from that place you'll act and speak very differently than if you were just fixated and cataloging everything that your family's done wrong or done bad by you. So I think when people can get into a place of gratitude for the kindness and love that's been shown to them, and then wanting to hold on to those relationships where they've experienced kindness and love, then you see reality much more clearly and you behave in a much socially responsible manner. But if you create a following, which I think Nick has done and Kanye has done and Richard has done in the past, following that is primarily based around hatred for outgroups, then that encourages your worst impulses. And
Certainly.
so one has to sober up, which means not just quitting the drugs and the alcohol and the pornography and self-destructive relationships, but also get into a place where you keep at the forefront of your mind the relationships that are most important to you. So most of my closest friendships are with Orthodox Jews, and I
Mhm.
kind of carry a sense of those connections with me. That even when I'm live streaming with secularist Joseph Cotto, or when I'm walking down the street, those are the most important relationships. Like that is the container in which I live my life. I have a sense of the love and connection that I
Certainly.
feel and experience within Orthodox Judaism, and then I carry that out into everything else I do. So I wouldn't want to be seen doing anything antisocial. I wouldn't want to be seen, doing anything bad or just even looking inappropriate, because it could, hurt and affect those most important relationships. Now, if your most important relationships are by people who are consumed with hatred and loathing and fear of outgroups, then that's only going to encourage the worst in you. So people have to connect to to those who have shown them love and to maintain those relationships. And if you're trying to fill yourself with outside attention, which seems like what Kanye is doing and what Nick Fuentes is doing, you're just going to be a bottomless hole. That's also like a Richard Spencer. He,
Mhm.
whenever you used to see him on a live stream, he was always drinking liquor. Now he sounds, even though he's
Yes.
gone towards the left in many ways, he speaks in a much more sober way these days. Why does he speak in a more sober way? Because he's quit drinking, right? So Richard Spencer on alcohol and on drugs is a very different person from a Richard Spencer who's sober. I think Kanye West, who is abstaining from drugs and alcohol, is going to be a very different person than a Kanye West indulging drugs and alcohol. And then a Kanye West who is focusing on those relationships that are most important to him from people who've given him love and kindness, and gets into a place of feeling gratitude for people who've extended love and kindness for him. If he lives in that space, if he's connected to that feeling and then is in that mode, he will make much more pro-social decisions. He will make wiser, more sober decisions. So you can get hooked on a lot of things, including fear and loathing for out groups, drugs, alcohol, sex, pornography, etc. But we have to connect to those relationships that are most important, because then we see the world more clearly and we behave in a much more effective manner.
Without question, I mean that's I agree with that entirely. Before we really do begin to wrap things up, what Richard Spencer's arc has been a truly astounding one. He was somebody who was very openly, one might say, white nationalist or even white supremacist, and he now is someone who sounds totally, to me, you cannot separate him from the rhetoric on MSNBC. Now, I totally understand leaving the white nationalist slash white supremacist movement. It's a good thing. These are toxic movements, but to the extent that he has changed his views, it seems to me almost artificial in that he would just do this 180. It's really to me strange. Typically, one would think that people would reconsider their views, have more nuanced takes on this, that, the other thing, not just chuck everything out and then adopt everything from the other side. Anything to say about this, Luke?
Well, I think if you simply sober up, you then take into consideration the effect of your words on your most important relationships and your social position. So I think you can account for much of Richard Spencer's change from simply sobering up, and he wants to hang out with a certain crowd. He wants to have a certain life, and the way he was speaking when he was under the influence of drugs and alcohol is simply not compatible with the type of life that he likes. So I think most of us, resonate to a certain aesthetic, and then we develop an ideology that justifies that aesthetic. Or most of us resonate with a certain social crowd or social group, and then we develop, our politics or our, religious denomination based on, what will connect us to that group of people that we most want to hang out with. So I think a lot of it is just sobering up, but I don't feel like Richard's on a positive trajectory, because I've sensed zero introspection about the negative effect he's had on other people.
Mhm.
So as soon as I hear Richard
Mhm.
Spencer talking about how, I feel like I harmed a lot of people, I feel like I led a lot of people in a bad direction, I feel like I was an antisocial influence, I feel like I encouraged many bad things in people, I feel like I was getting drunk on having people, give me Heil Hitler salutes. I think that I had, a very negative and damaging effect on the MAGA movement and on Donald Trump. As soon as we start to hear Richard Spencer like taking into consideration the enormous amount of harm that he has done, then I think there's reason to rejoice and think, oh, this guy's on a good trajectory. And I'd say the same thing for Nick Fuentes and Kanye West and Milo Yiannopoulos. So Milo's gotten religion, but I've never heard any introspection from him. Okay, I need to now make amends for all the gratuitous harm that I did to completely innocent people. I've got none of that from Milo, so I don't take his religious transformation very seriously.
Mhm.
Nick Fuentes has undoubtedly had a negative influence on many people's lives. I get no sense of introspection from him. Kanye West has had a negative influence on many people's lives, particularly his performances over the past 5 weeks. So as soon as we start getting introspection from these people on how they have needlessly affected, influenced, directed, shaped, twisted people in negative directions. As soon as people start taking into account, what they've done to other people, to society, to discourse generally, then I think there's reason to be optimistic about their trajectory. But until that happens, I would be more pessimistic than optimistic about the trajectory of Richard Spencer, Nick Fuentes, Milo
Sure.
Yiannopoulos, Ali Alexander Akbar, Alex Jones, Kanye West, that whole crowd, until you take responsibility for the harm you've done and start making concrete efforts to clean up your side of the street and making amends for your negative effects. I don't have a lot of hope for you.
Mhm. No, I agree entirely. What do you think the future has in store for? We talked about Kanye slash Ye slash West, but as we do wrap things up, what do you think the future has in store for Milo Yiannopoulos? Because he seriously wants his fame back. You could tell, he's just basically an attention whore. But he's not getting that level of notoriety he had several years ago. Do you think he'll just continue on this path, or do you think eventually he'll just become someone who is a dropout from the internet? What do you think is going to become of him? Because even though he doesn't have that attention, he seriously wants it, but he has no prospect of regaining it.
Well, he has a lot of talent. He has a lot of brains, and he's still around and he's still able to capture our attention. So I would not bet on him, totally flaming out, self-destructing. On the other hand, I don't yet have hope for him, but I think his future is very much up to him, and it's entirely possible that you can say words and you can construct an identity, in his case a Christian identity, just like architects shape
Mhm.
buildings, but then the buildings shape us. And so it's possible the words that Milo is saying about his newfound love of Jesus and Christianity, it's entirely possible that he is constructing something that will end up shaping him eventually. Like
Mhm.
right now, he's using Christianity for his own means, and Nick
Mhm.
Fuentes is using Christianity for his own means, and it seems like Kanye West is using Christianity for his own means. But sometimes we try to use people or institutions or ideas of movements, and then only in retrospect do we see that they then were using us. And so it's entirely possible that Milo may right now building a temple of empty words about Jesus that might become a real temple that perhaps shapes him in a positive direction.
And finally, Nick Fuentes, what do you think the future has in store for him? He's probably, aside from Kanye, the most interesting person here because he had a massive following a few years ago on YouTube. He's getting like 250,000 views per episode between people who watch during a live stream and those who watch the replay. And now he's down to his website where he gets, I think, on average about 6,000 views live, 6,000 views afterward. It's a fraction of what he used to get, and he's getting older. He's in his I think mid 20s now, or I think he is in his. Let me think. Yeah, I believe he is in his mid 20s. Yeah, he'd have to be. So he doing the whole precocious Alex P. Keaton with quote unquote base politics thing cannot last. And he's getting more and more marginalized. And certainly his thing with Kanye slash Ye slash West is going to further put him on the margins. I don't know he'll have an audience as time goes along because a lot of people cycle in and out of there. He's not widely available enough now in his show to have a lot of people cycling in. What do you think the future holds for him?
Well, he has so much talent. He has so much charisma. He is so glib. He is such a great speaker, live streamer. On the other hand, he has ghettoized himself. He has essentially made his world smaller and smaller. So there are these contrary forces that are working against each other. So I think 50% chance he's got a good future that he can turn things around. 50% chance that he just makes his world smaller and smaller. I think out of everyone that we've talked about, he's the most psychologically stable. I think overall, watching his streams, they're not overall, some hateful, antisocial thing, even though they contain, gratuitously hateful and some antisocial elements. But most of his streaming is just kind of fun Zoomer level entertainment. So he doesn't have the Heil Hitler toxicity of Richard Spencer. So yeah, I think very good chance, 50% chance that he can expand his world, expand his life, turn things into a more positive direction. He seems the most stable out of everyone that we've talked about, and so therefore, I think he is the most adept at grappling with reality and being effective, with reality.
And this is a question about Zoomers, because obviously you cannot really discuss what is going on with Fuentes or Kanye slash Ye slash West and not talk about Zoomers. Zoomers to me seem a particularly troubled generation. They are the generation, and I say it says millennial. I believe you'd be Generation X, if I'm not mistaken. The Zoomers seem to me to be a group that is uniquely untethered to reality. They're not very interested in consistency. If you talk to them about hypocrisy, as I've tried to do, they're not terribly interested in it. Even millennials were interested in not being hypocrites, but Zoomers, they kind of like have a detachment from life that's quote unquote ironic, and they don't take much of anything seriously. I think a lot of this is because they are the first totally online and in some cases extremely online generation, where they grew up with these pseudo anonymous internet accounts, which would lead them to adopt and discard identities in rapid succession. So after a while, they do stuff and they're never held to account for it. And it's sort of like the old rules don't apply to them, or so they think. But I think Zoomers are very bad when it comes to socialization and when it comes to dealing with adversity and when it comes to basically managing their emotions. I think you certainly see a lot of that in Nick and his followers. Anything to say about Zoomers? Do you think I'm off base, on base? What's going on?
I tend to be skeptical of too much assertion about generations. So I think Zoomers will be just as productive and just as flawed as prior generations. I mean, obviously, technology they live more of their lives online, and so there will be both a price to pay from that and good things to come from that. So I have as much hope and expectation from Zoomers as any other generation that we've had roll through here.
And finally, if Kanye slash Ye slash West were listening to this, I don't think he ever will. But if he did, what advice would you give him to turn his ship around?
Get away, get sober, get a sponsor, work the 12 steps, get a good non-Jewish psychiatrist, get a good non-Jewish psychologist, therapist, get a sober companion, get friends who are good people, get guidance from Christian clergy that you trust, like Nick and Kanye, wave their Christianity around like a bloody flag, but you never hear any Christian clergy actually supporting them. So I think if Kanye and Nick were part of a concrete Christian community where they'd get feedback from the fellow members of the community, where they would have clergy who they would listen to, that that would have a sobering effect and a productive and positive effect on their lives. Most people do better living life in community rather than as isolated, atomized individuals. Only isolated, atomized individuals can say and do the crazy things that Nick Fuentes, Kanye West, Ali Alexander, Milo Yiannopoulos have done. If these people all along were part of a concrete Christian community with rules and traditions, and they were getting feedback from other members of their community, and they had clergy who they need to listen to, that they would not have gotten into the mess that they've made.
And that is tonight's show. Luke, thank you very much for stopping by. I hope to see you here again very soon. There's no shortage of interesting stuff for us to chat about. And if you wouldn't mind sharing, where can people find your stuff?
Oh, great. Yeah. So I'm on Twitter /Luke Ford, Facebook /Luke C Ford, website's lukeford.net. I've got two YouTube channels, Luke Ford Livestreams 18 and Luke is Back. I'm also on Rumble /Luke Ford. I'm on Odyssey. And yeah, send me an email, lukeisback@gmail.com.
Excellent. And I hope people do check your stuff out. It is very interesting. And I do look forward to our next chat, as I mentioned. Once again, Luke, thank you very much for stopping by today.
Thank you. Take care, Joseph.